This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the Iranian nuclear deal. The Obama administration says it keeps Iran from getting the bomb. Critics say it's the worst international agreement the U.S. has ever made. We examine the impact on the U.S., Israel, and the Middle East at large. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Today we take an in-depth look at the deal brokered by the U.S. and 5 other world powers to stop Iran's nuclear program. Caitlin Burke begins our coverage.
There were celebrations in the streets of Iran after negotiators announced the agreement. But a different reaction from many here in the U.S., the nuclear deal igniting a new political battle between President Obama and critics of the deal.
It may be the worst diplomatic agreement in the history of the United States.
It looks very much like they made a worse deal than even we had feared.
The agreement lays out a plan to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities, at least for now. Iran will voluntarily cut back most of its nuclear activities for the next 10 years, and they'll submit to managed international inspections. In return, the U.S. and its allies lift the crippling sanctions placed on Iran's economy. Critics say it's a very good deal for the Iranian regime, but a very bad deal for America and the rest of the world. They say it can't be verified or enforced. Iran hasn't agreed to anytime, anywhere inspections, isn't dismantling its nuclear program, and will likely use the windfall to fund terrorism.
So what's the alternative? The alternative is to, what, go to war immediately? Bomb them? Sanction them further? Well, wait, no, you can't sanction them further.
The plan now goes before the Senate, and Republicans are already unified in opposition.
Ending Iran's nuclear program was supposed to be the point of these talks in the first place. What's already clear about this agreement is that it will not achieve or even come close to achieving that original purpose.
Israel, too, is voicing its opposition to the agreement.
Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran because Iran continues to seek our destruction. We will always defend ourselves.
The White House announced that President Obama has assured Netanyahu that the U.S. continues to support Israel. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Now President Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu want to persuade Congress to either accept or reject the deal. But the agreement is already shifting the Middle East landscape. During an hour-long press conference, President Obama defended his deal.
With this deal, we cut off every single one of Iran's pathways to a nuclear program, a nuclear weapons program. And Iran's nuclear program will be under severe limits for many years.
In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched a U.S. media blitz against the agreement.
I think the inspection regime is full of holes because instead of having instant inspections, say within 24 hours, Iran has 24 days to open up suspect sites. 24 days. Imagine giving a drug dealer 24 days.
President Obama says the agreement with Iran was a risk he had to take. But many Israelis on the front lines of that risk are skeptical. 74% say the deal won't stop Iran from developing a nuclear bomb.
It's a bad deal because sooner or later it's going to reach us.
The world doesn't realize that the Islamic people, they want to take over the world.
No, because Iran is keeping saying that Israel and the States and Europe has to be destroyed and everything, and has to be Islamic. So they're going to continue doing everything.
But Iranians cheered in the streets of Tehran. Iranian-born Middle East expert Menashe Amir told CBN News he expects Iran to cheat and says the agreement opens the doors for Iranian scientists.
The fact that the Iranian scientists have the permission to continue the research means that Iran will continue to find better ways of enhancing its nuclear programs, that after 6 years or 8 years, they will begin in a very fast way to make the bomb.
Because of this, Amir says it will cause a Middle East nuclear arms race.
We are talking today about a united Arab forces, which will include Saudis, Egyptians and other countries. and they may make a united corporation for making the nuclear bomb, or having the protection of the Pakistanis who have the first Islamic bomb.
Besides a nuclear arms race, some compare the $150 billion in sanctions relief to Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world, to a jihadist stimulus bill that will pour fuel on an already burning Middle East fire. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem. More than ever, Israel is depending on the U.S. Christian community to speak up on its behalf. This week, the largest pro-Israel Christian organization in America promised to do just that. And as Eric Steckelbeck reports, they came from across the country to stand with the Jewish state and against the nuclear deal with Iran.
Good afternoon, everybody.
With the Obama administration and other world powers agreeing to a much criticized nuclear deal with the Iranian regime, Israel is counting on its friends in America to step up and speak out. This week in Washington, Christians United for Israel did not disappoint. With Iran marching towards a nuclear weapon and ISIS marching towards its borders, Israel is in a very precarious position. That's why thousands of Christian supporters of the Jewish state came here to Washington to make their voices heard. CUFI founder Pastor John Hagee announced that his group is opening an office in Washington, D.C. to mobilize politically on issues affecting Israel. The CUFI Action Fund's first priority is to press Congress to stop the Iran nuclear deal.
Our mission for the future is to defend the state of Israel and the Jewish people in a world where the Jewish people are being targeted for assassination.
Hagee was joined by several Republican candidates in calling the Iran agreement an historic mistake for Israel and America.
There's no way to have a legitimate framework with people who are continued sponsors of state terrorism.
We need to have a deeper debate about this and a recognition that past is prologue. History is full of examples of when you enable people or regimes that don't embrace democratic values without any concessions, you get a bad result.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also addressed the summit via satellite, warning that radical Islam is on the march against both Christians and Jews.
Friends, the Middle East is imploding all around us. States that have existed for a century are disintegrating. I've said it before, and I'll say it once again tonight. Israel has no better friend than America, and America has no better friend than Israel.
With an agreement reached between the West and Iranian leaders, Congress will now weigh in. Israel's ambassador to the United States encouraged CUFI members to continue to make their case to lawmakers.
Last year, as Hamas missiles rained down from Gaza on Israel, I stood at this podium to ask you to stand with Israel during war. Tonight, I ask you to stand with Israel to prevent war.
A regional war that could rage out of control if Iran acquires nuclear weapons and sparks a nuclear arms race among the Muslim nations of the Middle East. Eric Stackelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, our CBN Roundtable discusses the ramifications of the deal and what it means for the U.S. and the Americans imprisoned in Iran. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. How does the Iranian nuclear deal affect the U.S. and the world? I took part in a CBN News roundtable hosted by my colleague George Thomas to explore those questions.
The United States literally is getting nothing from Iran other than half-hearted promises that, yeah, maybe we'll comply and we'll let you maybe check out some of our nuclear sites. Iran has refused, for instance, to put its ballistic missile program on the table, George, and that's a big deal for Americans. Iran has the largest ballistic missile program in the Middle East, short range, medium range, and yes, Iran is working on ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, long range, that could one day reach the United States. So we don't get much out of this. We certainly don't get peace of mind. And really, to be biblical about it, George, this deal is so bad on so many levels. I think it's an abomination. I don't say that word lightly, and it may eventually cause desolation in the Middle East because we've seen this deal compared to Neville Chamberlain, Hitler, caused World War II, 40 million dead. this deal could be even worse because nuclear weapons could kill many, many millions more.
John, to you, one of the biggest concerns with this deal is the fate of Christians and others held by the Iranian government for crimes against the Islamic government. Were any provisions made for the release of people like Pastor Saeed Abedini, who's being held simply for his Christian faith?
No matter what behind-the-scenes agreements may have been made, Iran doesn't have any intention of holding to any of them unless they want to, unless it benefits the mullahs themselves. Then we may see some action on that front, but it's not something that any signed piece of paper or any backroom deals are going to be followed through on.
Mm-hmm. Gary, are you concerned that these folks are going to continue languishing in these prison cells?
Well, yes, and George, it isn't just them. It's also about 89 other Christians, Iranians, that are being held in prison there. They recently released Behnam Irani and allowed him to house church pastor, to go back with his family. He has to go back to prison on July 19th. So what about these others? What about Saeed Abedini? We've heard nothing about him. I'm afraid that things will continue. It'll be much of the same. The crackdown against Christians will continue there.
Eric, to you, sir, in Washington, D.C., how will this impact our nation, and why should we care about this deal?
Well, number one, George, I mentioned that intercontinental ballistic missile program that Iran continues to develop. It was not on the table as part of that deal. Those missiles could one day reach America. You only build ICBMs for one reason, George. That's to mount them with a nuclear warhead. Now, why would Iran want to do that? So that's number one. Number two, everyone needs to remember that Iran still considers America the great Satan. They're very open about it. The supreme leader of Iran, as these negotiations were going on this week, led chants of death to America among millions of Iranians in the streets of Tehran. The ideology of the Iranian regime is one that seeks not only the destruction of Israel, but yes, the destruction of America.
John, to you, sir, Congress has basically about 60 days to review this. Will it try to stop the deal?
Oh, I think without question, Congress will try to stop the deal. But the train has left the station here, George. I mean, they can put rejection to it, but what's going to happen is the parties are going to divide. The Republicans and Democrats are already deeply divided, not only over foreign policy, but domestic policy. And so what it's going to become is a political football. Yeah. And in the meantime, President Obama is going to move forward and trying to cement his legacy.
Up next, our roundtable continues, discussing the reaction from Israel and the Middle East. Welcome back. The U.S. nuclear deal with Iran has caused great concern here in Israel and across the Middle East about the rise of an empowered Iran. Our CBN News Roundtable continues with those topics.
Do you see this as an opportunity for Israel realizing the consequences of this treaty, that in essence this gives Israel perhaps the green light to defend itself?
Well, Israel will take that green light. Prime Minister Netanyahu drew the red lines several years ago, and I think Israelis across the political spectrum are blasting this deal. It doesn't take much when you have people like Ahmadinejad and Rouhani and Ayatollah Khamenei saying, we want to wipe out Israel, and you do it over a period of decades. It doesn't take much for a government to say, we will respond to this. And Israel has to respond to this. And what it's going to do is jumble the alliances all around the world, and it puts the whole world, and especially the Middle East as a region, in real danger of an all-out conflict.
Does this give impetus to Saudi Arabia to say, listen, if the Iranians can have a nuclear bomb, acquire a nuclear bomb, why can't we?
Well, certainly.
And could this lead to an arms race in the region?
It is the start of an arms race in the Middle East, and John Kerry was not listening to what our allies in the Middle East were telling him. They're saying this is going to lead to an arms race in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia will now try to develop a nuclear weapon, and you also have other Sunnis that are still battling against the Shiites, not only in Syria, but also in Lebanon. What about Hezbollah? And the billions of dollars, the billions in being able to resell oil now, and also the frozen assets being lifted, Iran will have a lot of money for more weaponry, for making war.
To that point also, Eric Stakelbeck in Washington, D.C., you look at the growing influence that the Iranians have today, whether it's in Yemen, in Syria. Does this give them, with this extra surplus of billions of dollars of cash, the sale of oil, I mean, their tentacles are going to grow even longer in the region?
Yeah. George, this is the key point. Now, Iran already controls effectively 4 Arab capitals: Baghdad in Iraq, Sana'a in Yemen, Beirut in Lebanon, Damascus in Syria. The Iranian regime effectively controls those key Arab capitals. Not only that, funding terror throughout the region. They are on the march right now, George. They feel like the wind is at their backs. And yes, ISIS and Iran are battling right now, but not because Iran is suddenly a rational player who's fond of the West. Iran and ISIS are fighting ultimately because they want the same thing. Both want to dominate the region and lead the global jihadist movement. And I have to say, if Iran has a nuclear weapon behind it, it will lead the region, the jihadist movement in that region. There will be a bullseye on Israel's back and a bullseye on the West's back. Because look, if Iran got its way and wiped Israel off the map, we've read the book, so we know that's not going to happen. But if they did, I don't think anyone watching believes they would stop there. They're coming here next.
Chris, just a few seconds before we go to the next break, to you in Jerusalem, does this put more pressure on Israel now?
When I was reading the report, George, it's a huge pressure. If you take a look at all the nations of the world, the P5+1, agreeing to this deal with Iran, and now Israel's going to find itself isolated by the world. What it does, whether it has a military strike against Iran, it's going to pit itself against most of the world powers. And so the pressure is enormous right now on Israel. Up next, how the Iranian deal affects the fight against ISIS. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. We concluded our CBN News Roundtable by examining how the nuclear deal affects the fight against ISIS. Here's the rest of our discussion.
Well, I think it brings ISIS into even more of a collision course with Iran, George. I think now Iran's going to say, look, now nothing is going to hold us back from our march across the region. I look for Iran's not going to back down, not going to stand down in fighting ISIS. So you're going to see Iran perhaps put even more assets into Iraq, into Syria, in particular in Iraq. Maybe Iran hesitated before to put so many assets in Iraq, but now you might see more and more Iranian assets in the form even of Iranian troops down the line move into Iraq as Iran slowly just consolidates its control, especially of the Shia areas of Iraq. So this does nothing to deter Iran from its march, and it's going to continue to battle ISIS. No end in sight, increasingly bloody in Iraq and Syria. It's not going to end well.
Gary, our folks are probably scratching their heads and saying, wait a minute, I thought we were against the Sunnis and fighting ISIS. Now the Shias against the Sunnis in ISIS. I mean, this is a convoluted mess in the Middle East.
Well, here's something else that Eric didn't mention, but to go along with what you said, Eric, is I was just recently in Syria along the Turkish border, and I met with a lot of Kurds there. And what the Kurds were telling me is, look, the Turks have been supporting ISIS. We know the Saudis and the Emiratis and maybe Qataris have also been involved in supporting ISIS, but primarily Turkey. Do you think they are going to allow Iran to destroy ISIS? Because they are long-time enemies. So Turkey may step up its support for ISIS. You may see some of the other Sunni regimes step up their support against ISIS because Iran is now emboldened. And they will want to counter that. They will not want to see Iran dominate the Middle East. So in addition to an arms race, I think you're going to see maybe a large-scale war, Sunni, Shia, fighting one another, George.
Is this a signal, this deal, a signal that the United States is now pivoting to the Persians, to the Iranians, after decades of supporting Sunni Saudi Arabia, that we are in essence pivoting to the Iranians?
Absolutely, George. This has been going on now for years and years. And as everything in the world kind of speeds up with technology and politics and diplomacy and communications, this thing has dragged out for now 37 years. from the time that they took our hostages back when the mullahs first took power in Iran until they blew up the barracks in Lebanon. And this is a full circle. We are now in the camp of the Iranians, as President Obama said, to bring them back, give them legitimacy internationally, worldwide, and it's going to rearrange the diplomatic and political balance of power in the world. And it's going to create all kinds of fissures and fault lines, not only worldwide, our alliances with Europe and Russia, China, all of those great powers, but also internally within the country.
Chris, you have interviewed many Iranian believers in various secret locations around the world. How are they reacting to this agreement?
Well, I think they would be mortified by what's going on right now, and I think many of them have fled Iran because of the persecution of Christians and believers. Many of them, as you know, we have talked to, have become believers in Jesus because of dreams and visions. And one of the largest growing churches and fastest growing churches is right now inside Iran, and so that's one phenomenon that's happening. But I think overall they would say that this is one capitulation to a regime that is tyrannical. It's against freedom. And to Gary's point, too, one thing that the Obama administration is doing is not supporting our natural allies like the Kurds. Instead, we're supporting the Iranian regime.
I was watching on Twitter and reading the comments. Iranians are quite positive. They're hoping that this will bring greater relationships, closer relationships between Iran and the United States.
Yes, and they want to see a better relationship. Yeah. They actually like the United States. Right. The regime may not like the United States too well, but the people of Iran, especially the younger people, love the United States. They want more U.S. products. They welcome the sanctions being lifted, but they're keeping a close eye on what this will do to embolden their regime.
Israelis are rightly concerned about this nuclear deal with Iran. They take seriously the threats by Iranian leaders when they say they want to destroy the Jewish state. For example, an Israeli told me recently, it feels like Armageddon. And many people feel we are living in the end times, the days when Jesus said nation would rise up against nation and there'd be wars and rumors of wars. But he also said during this time to look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. And we can take comfort in those words. Well, that's it for this edition. Please follow us throughout the week on Twitter or Facebook. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.